authorize the city to enter into a lease agreement with New Singular Wireless PCS. We've been notified by administration that they're not moving forward with this item at this time, so we're going to take no action as a committee.
Do you want an update as to what we're doing?
I'm going to stand corrected in a moment. Apparently, we're going to get a quick update from the... Okay, we'll get a quick update from the city before we withdraw that matter.
Sure. Sorry. I'm Erin Howard. I am the Director of Economic Development for the City of Hartford in Development Services. So just to give you a quick update, we have tabled this item because at the original committee meeting that we met, we brought up to the attention that we really need to do a little bit more legwork to figure out how to create a master licensing agreement that could be shared across all the carriers. Where are we at today? We are working with the mayor's office to create an internal working group with all city departments. On top of that, Eric Johnson and I have actually been working with 5 cities. The 5 big cities have actually created a group managed and helped out by the RPA to really start looking into 5G matters. We've gotten together over the last month. About 2 weeks ago, we got a seat at the table with the Governor's 5G Council, who also wants to work with the big cities and work with us on developing a master licensing agreement. Wow, okay. And that's it. So that's where we're at right now. I know we have some folks in the room. We do need to coordinate with the carriers. It makes no sense for us to do that at the moment until I have A, all of the team members together, and B, we're getting some direction from the Governor's Council. So just kind of a quick update. Probably have more for you at the next meeting for sure. They're actually looking to Hartford to help them with what we've actually already negotiated or worked out so far with AT&T in a master licensing agreement going forward. So there is progress. It's just we're not ready to actually present anything formal to council. So, oh, and we do have, we did negotiate a tolling agreement with AT&T. We do need to come back to you next month and kind of give you a more detailed update as to where we are, but the tolling agreement does give us time working with AT&T, which we're gracious for, to meet the FCC standard, because technically the FCC standard said we had to act in 60 days, where AT&T has worked with us and our corporation council in order to extend that. I think we have until March technically to make a decision. So just that quick update. Any questions?
Well, it certainly sounds like this is all very appropriate. We've got a lot of changes in technology, and it certainly would make sense, as opposed to doing it piecemeal, that you do this as sort of a bigger picture with the whole state in mind, moving forward in somewhat uniform fashion.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Great.
Okay. Any questions, anyone?
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, thank you. Item number 2 on the agenda is communication from Mayor Bronin with accompanying resolution authorizing the city to sell parcels on New Park Avenue, Francis Avenue, and Francis Court. And again, my understanding from administration is that this is not going to be going forward at this time. Will be reintroduced after January 1. So for tonight's purposes, no action will be taken on this agenda. Which brings us to item number 3, which is a PowerPoint presentation from Aqua Arc LLC of a potential development project on the Connecticut River adjacent to the Mortensen Plaza. And in the agenda that went out, there was a description of the project, but I will forego the description of the project this time because we're going to get a presentation on it. I would just say that leading up to this presentation, and excuse us for a second while we find a seat for our other councilwoman, Molly Rosado.
Okay. Would you like
Kelly's
to sit
getting
here?
the chair.
No, you can continue. Go ahead. Would you like to sit here or over there? Up here.
Not in the middle of the, okay. So I would just say that in February of 2018, council passed a resolution that sought from riverfront recapture continued exploration of development opportunities along the Connecticut River, specifically development opportunities that would provide economic benefits. And following the adoption of that resolution, we were contacted by Aqua Arc, who has made some preliminary overtures in having discussions with some of the players here in Hartford, and has now coming to us tonight to provide this presentation. And I'll let you, George, fill in all that background. So without any further ado, George Bryant.
Good evening, council members. Thank you very much for inviting me. We really appreciate this. AquaArc, just one second, I'll get my ableist architect and assistant here, David Mooney, going. We're talking about being able to put a amphibious promenade that would sit south of the current Mortenson River Plaza area, and approximately a little over an acre's worth of land in the flat portion between the water barrier and the normal river bank. Go to the next one. First up, a little bit about us. AquaArc is North America's first large on-the-water development corporation. We were founded about 4 years ago, and tonight we're going to talk about a little bit about our history, which we've done, partners, projects that we have executed. We're also going to talk a little about the environment as we see it, visions for what we have for what could go in the area that we're discussing, inspirations for that our visions come from, talk a little about next steps, and then obviously answer questions and engage in any kind of discussion that comes subsequent to that. When we first got started 4 years ago, we wanted to make sure that we had the best that we could grab from really an emerging set of technologies for being able to provide waterborne facilities. Our primary partner in this is a company out of Germany called Clement. They have pretty much written the book on how to design and put together long-lasting waterborne foundations for any kind of building. Their buildings are underwritten by Lloyd's of London and are designed to last 50 years or more. David Mooney, who is doing the honors of taking us through the presentation today, is our architect. And we are supported by Collective Design Associates. They're out of Westport, Connecticut. They have done a lot of work in providing floating buildings. They provided the connections for utilities and a lot of the engineering work for the floating prison that exists off the South Bronx. Orenco is our last partner. We are very environmentally conscious, and Orenco is a preeminent provider of on-premise waste treatment facilities. They take care of sewage at the source. They do everything from small residential up to whole communities. And we are in a position to be able to basically engineer that into our facilities to make sure that we keep the environment as pure as we can. Our project experience is largely in the Middle East and in Europe. This one example here is a floating highway in Dubai. It is a 6-lane highway. Next is a floating park that was built for an exhibition in Rostock, Germany about 6 years ago. That is a number of different barges that are linked together and with gardens on top. It was quite popular at the time. This is an existing seaside community in the Baltic. It is a part of a growing part. This is about 1/3 of it. It's still being developed as we speak. And this is a floating theater that was on Lake Lucerne. It's a theater in the round, and it was part of a festival 3 or 4 summers ago. It's now looking for a new home, but it was very popular as an attraction to the folks there for this festival. So the project environment we're talking about is it's a very challenging one, but we think it has a lot of promise. And let me just stop for just 1 second and get to one thing, is that we've been talking about floating stuff, right? This is not designed at the basis to be a floating edifice. It will not float on the river per se 90+% of the time. What we're doing is applying the extensive knowledge and expertise that we have in designing floats to be able to make sure that when the water comes, that this quote-unquote land-based facility, and we'll get more into that in a little bit, is able to rise on the floodwaters and continue to be in operation to a point, and if it gets bad enough, it will survive any kind of flooding and then settle back down and be integrated into the landscape that's on the riverbank itself right now. So we have great respect for the amount of work, long-term work, starting in the 80s, 20 years plus, just to get to the point where the Mortensen Plaza was finally finished, and obviously the years since then, where Riverfront Recapture has done a fabulous job in creating what we really see as a gem, the TRI. My first experience with the area here was approximately 6 years ago. Both my children row, and they were here part of the Riverfront Recapture Regatta, and really just marveled at what a gorgeous spot this place is. With that comes obviously the wall that separates you from this gorgeous area, and that the challenge here is the fact that it does flood regularly. I mean, we're looking 3 to 5 years back, we're seeing typical flood levels at about 18, sometimes higher, feet above standard river level. And the fact that that flooding stops the creation of any kind of buildings or anything else to create economic activity on it, there's not a permanent draw. There are wonderful festivals and the regatta I spoke about before, movie stuff, obviously the music that goes on, et cetera. But we feel that there is a real opportunity to create something that will create an ongoing draw for people to come to the waterfront, something that they know is going to be there. Go to the next, please. So this is a vision. We're going to talk about two visions tonight. This is two parts to this. David, get that next on the screen there. Thanks. One more time. So, as I said, our vision, for the most part, it really starts, excuse me, starts with the whole idea that we need to create a facility that's going to adapt to the realities of the fact that this river floods, and floods regularly, and it floods to a fairly high level. And that we need to be able to have a facility that can be used for most, if not all the time, even if it is flooding. Go to the next. We're going to take technology that I've shown you examples of and apply it to an amphibious construct that allows a walkway and a set of buildings that can house restaurants, event spaces, shops, regular lower cost food options and the like, for folks to be able to come down and know that they're going to be there. That we're going to leverage the proximity to your great downtown area here, obviously the convention center and the science center, and add on to that. And the real point here is that this facility is designed to thrive in most situations, namely, even if there is water, folks should be able to come and still enjoy it. And it will survive if things get bad enough, and do so in such a way that the actual buildings on top are not going to be damaged, and they will return to operation as quickly as possible. So, vision number one really is two large buildings attached to a walkway. The one on the left here is one that would have shops and small food vendors. On the lower floor and the upper floor, it could be event space. It could actually even be a boating hotel. We're looking at various different options for being able to make that happen. The second one has a rooftop restaurant. Let me click to the next to be easier. Which you can see here, and have the ability, again, for more shopping and cafes on the ground floor. How this is made is that we create a foundation basin. It's regular concrete. It has H-beams sunk into the ground as pilings. And within that, we build basically a rising barge, for lack of a better term. It is a concrete and polystyrene sandwich. Again, to reiterate, it is guaranteed design life for 50 plus years. It's underwritten from an insurance perspective. And when the water does come, that inside float foundation rises with the water. It's held in place by the H-beams as guides along the side. And when the water goes away, it goes back down again. In order to make sure that utilities, sewage, and the like are all maintained regardless of the water level, we're leveraging technology that is used by cruise ships when they come to port and are rising up and down on tides. And this flexible arrangement shown here allows electricity, natural gas, water, and sewage to be able to be maintained through the rise and fall of the building itself. Shown here is a river rise of approximately 14 feet. As you can see, you can still come down in Mortenson Plaza itself, and then you have access via ramp onto the floating promenade and access to all the buildings that continue in operation as per normal. Another vision, slightly less in height, but I think also of merit to discuss, is shown here. And here we've kept everything on one level. So the promenade remains the same. It's just the buildings are a little different. If you go to the next slide real fast. This, the left-hand side or the south side, is kiosk shops that could have obviously retail areas, also food vendors and the like, open spot that we could go to. And the last is quite frankly a similar restaurant to the rooftop we showed you before, except it's at ground level. And we have the ability here to enclose that during the colder months to be able to make sure that it is running in continued operation as a draw. Our inspirations for this, there are quite a lot of them. There is a lot going on with waterfront worldwide. This is fairly recent. It's Pier 17 in Manhattan. It does not float, but it is right at the water's edge and provides a major draw. In fact, I believe there is a television studio operation that works out of there in the morning. It also has interestingly enough, because we're a new partner we're bringing on board, has designed and is operating a skating rink on the top of that. And we see that as an example of the kind of thing that can exist near the waterfront. Go to the next. This is the Thames River in London, which has a very long set of walkways that are right on the river, and apartments and restaurants, et cetera. It goes on for 3.5 kilometers, and they're about to add more onto it. Really, there's on both sides of the river. It's quite impressive. This is more close to home, is in San Antonio, Texas. It's the Riverwalk. Interesting arrangement. They took, in essence, what was a quite frankly, almost an open sewer, and starting in the 1930s, found a way to block it off. That's how they get rid of their flooding problem. And they created this over time. It now adds over $2 billion a year in economic activity to the city of San Antonio. Lastly, just to show you the scale that floating foundations can be gone to, and really a big inspiration for us. This is the floating foundation for a casino, the Lumiere, outside of St. Louis. Now, it was built, to be honest with you, to be able to claim that it's a riverboat gambling operation. That's why the water. But it does have the ability to go up and down with water in a flood condition. So for us, next steps is, obviously this is a vision, and there are a lot of details. Mark Nickel from Riverfront Recapture and I have been talking on a number of different things. There are a number of challenges that need to be done. There are a number of questions to be asked and a lot of work to be able to make this thing actually come to fruition. The second part is once we've done all that, we need to go and we need to talk to the permitting board. I will tell you that on the water construction in Connecticut is not smiled upon by the DEEP. I've had some dealings with them. But again, that is all open to making sure that we answer the right questions and get our ducks in a row. And then lastly, once we've done all that, then we've got to make it happen. I'm now open to answer questions as I can. I apologize that my engineering folks, Bruce DeRigney, can't be here tonight, another obligation. But he's willing, and I will take notes and get questions answered and get them back to you.
Thank you very much. I must say it's a very, very exciting presentation. It would, I'm sure, it would certainly enliven things here in Central Connecticut if this were to happen. So let me just ask you a couple of questions about it, questions that have already come up with me. First question, and I think you said this in your presentation, but I just want to make sure I'm clear. Where you're proposing this is adjacent to the Mortensen Plaza and to the south of it. And do I understand that you're building into the existing land that is presently there?
That is correct, yes.
So this is not extending out into the river any further than the existing bank right now?
No, in fact, it's set back a good, I think the closest part is about 8 feet away.
I'm sorry, say that again?
I said the closest part is currently designed, it's about 8 feet away.
From the existing edge of the water?
Yeah.
So it's set back from the existing edge?
Yes, it is.
And so building it into the bank, my understanding is that that bank serves in part as a dike to protect the city, or that bank rests up against a dike that's protecting the city.
Yes, the shoreline there rests against it. From the from the engineering drawings that we've seen, we feel that we're far enough away, and we can certainly modify the extent of it if need be, but we think we're far enough away that the existing mounted earth that is supporting the barrier wall is not affected by this installation.
So your project is not affecting the dike, and the other side of it, it's not supporting the dike either.
At this point in time, no, it is not supporting the dike.
But it's not undercutting the dike's effectiveness.
From what we have seen from the drawings, no, we don't believe that's the case.
You've mentioned that this would float up in flooding times.
Yes.
My sense of the Connecticut River here is that we can have 4-foot shifts in the rise of the water, over a 1-day period, a 2-day period. We get a lot of rain, it comes down the river, and it'll go from 3 feet to 8 feet. And then it'll come back down to 5 feet. And then, later in the week, it'll go back up again, and then it'll come back down again. So it's not just a once or twice a year change in the river. It's I think it's probably, multiple times a week that the river is changing, and it is also tidal.
Yes.
So does that have any effect on this, or is this just going to go up and down as the river goes up and down?
It'll go up and down as the river goes up and down, presuming the water gets that high, yes.
So, and I don't know, when you say water gets that high, I don't know what we're talking about.
What it basically means is that right now the base level of this is at approximately 8.5 to 9 feet above what we consider normal river to begin with. So it's not resting, quote unquote, in the water. You can almost think of it in boat terms as like sitting in a cradle And when the water gets high enough, it lifts out of the cradle. It's held in place by the H-beams that it's attached to. It goes up, and then it goes back down.
Okay, thank you. And although you didn't mention it in your presentation, the written proposal that we've received put a price tag, a rough price tag on the more ambitious.
Yes, I have price tags for both of them. So the one you're seeing on the screen right now is approximately $40 million. The one, the lesser scaled one is approximately $9 million.
And if I understood from the written presentation we received, you're proposing to come up with the financing and the equity contribution to fund the $40 million construction
That is
cost.
correct, yes.
So what would you be looking for from the city of Hartford in order to move forward?
We would look for, obviously, an agreement for the land use that is there. We're not, something we'd have to negotiate to see what is best for us in the city of Hartford to be able to make happen.
And so your proposal builds in the concept that in one form or another, I'm going to use the word tax, you're going to be paying some property tax on this.
I would presume so, yeah.
Okay. All right, those are all the questions I have for the moment. So other council members?
So I mentioned the marina earlier with you.
Yes.
So what's the possibility of including a marina in your plans, knowing that now that it will cost $40 million?
Obviously, there's a cost factor with that. It really comes down to exactly what the extent that you want there. I mean, as I stated before, there are some environmental arrangements here. This is it is a naturally narrowing of a river that is wide, understanding that it is fed by the catch basin of basically most of Vermont, parts of New Hampshire, and Massachusetts coming down, all that water coming down, especially when you get meltage and stuff like that, and ice with it. A marina there would most likely need to be seasonal and removed, I would say, just off the top of my head.
And just so I have a good understanding on how the concept of this structure and how it's going to flow, is basically you're cutting out into the riverbank a basin, sort of, right?
Yes.
And this basin, will it be an enclosed basin, or will it be open to the river, three-sided?
It's closed. It will have, for lack of a better term, venting, so the water can come in and go out.
Okay, so then, okay, I see. And then, and it's free-flowing, of course.
Yes.
So that it'll rise and fall with the level of the river during the winter thawing or storm events.
That is correct.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Through the chair, thank you so much for the presentation. This is an excellent proposal and certainly something that a lot of council members and others are excited to hear more about. So thank you for being here today. I have a couple of questions. So in terms of the permitting process, can you walk us through what that would look like?
There are two major elements that have to do. The first is the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection, DEEP. They control the permitting side for the state on doing this. The other one is the Army Corps of Engineers. They don't want to do anything that deals with navigable waterways and also can potentially provide hazards in the river. Those are the two primary ones that are there.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so going back to DEEP, we had received a letter from the previous commissioner,
Yes.
Commissioner Klee, who wasn't exactly thrilled about an idea of similar to this.
Yes.
And so have there been any conversations with the new commissioner?
To this point, there is not. And really, it's a chicken and egg thing. I could go for permitting and then come back, but I wanted to be able to work with city and riverfront recapture and getting exactly what you wanted. Then we go and talk to them and see whether they are amenable to allowing this to happen.
So potentially, if you had, say, the full support of council and potentially the full support of the mayor's office for a project like this, then at that point, you would sit down with Deep to have more extensive conversations to then potentially begin.
We think that's a prudent way to go, yes.
Okay, so the other question is, how would this be paid? How would, there's a lot of costs, so you mentioned
Yes.
different costs between 40 million and then, so who would fund this? What are your potential funding sources?
I've got private wealth management offices. I obviously have some funds of my own that would be able to make this happen. I don't want to name them because anybody I tell you about today may or may not join in. I don't know. We need to get down to the point of, candidly, I put numbers on a paper. Mm-hmm. I go to talk to the people and say, we think that this is a viable operation to the tune of this kind of return, and they sit there and say, we're behind it.
Mm-hmm. So, but we're looking at, I mean, obviously without giving names, but what we're looking at is primarily private.
Yes. Mm-hmm. I'm not looking for state funds for this right now, no.
Okay.
I mean, I don't know exactly what needs to be provided for by the city of Hartford at this point in time, but I don't see the direct funding of that. There may be rights of way, there may be a few other things need to be done on the utility side that may need to be met in the middle or discussed, but right now I can't foresee anything saying, for this building I need so much money, no.
And in the other projects, because you know you've had projects all over the world, and you mentioned also New York. So in other projects, has there been the opportunity to also leverage federal funding dollars to a project of this magnitude?
As with anything, there may be. I don't want to characterize it because sometimes you deal with things such as opportunity zones. You deal with other operations that may be able to be. I don't know the status of opportunity zones here. To be honest with you, I didn't come equipped to talk about that. From our standpoint, we were not looking for federal dollars, but I wouldn't preclude being able to get that.
Mm-hmm. All right. Okay, so any thoughts about also opening up the conversation with state elected officials as well?
I'd love to be able to talk to the state.
For funding, that's why I referenced
Yeah,
that.
yes.
Yep. Okay. And then you mentioned the cradle. And what about if the water ever got higher than the cradle? So if I mean, and I'm looking at this from an environmental lens, climate change, more rainfall per year, harsher winters, potentially harsher amounts of, probably significant amounts of snow. And I'm not looking at this just, you know, from a 10-year increment, let's say from a 40-year aspect.
Without overly patting our companies on the back, it's really the foundation of what we're about, is trying to deal with the whole idea that water levels in events such as this are continuing, they're getting worse. And our fundamental tenet at AquaArc is that it's better to live with and on the water than trying to build barriers against it. So if you're talking about, right now our design spec is to retain the building in place to and above the current height of the barrier wall that you have. That's why, I mean, if you take a close look at those H-beams, they are significant.
So how can, in a hypothetical scenario,
Yes.
if you were to receive support from the council, what would be, in what way, or what is it that you're specifically looking for to be able to get this to that next level with Deep from council?
Oh, from the council? I would obviously like to be able to make sure that the city of Hartford and Riverfront Recapture are delivering us input that we are developing the most conducive edifice that we can in the area prescribed that we've talked about right now. That is our biggest thing. What makes the most sense for driving, what you guys would like to see as an amenity for your riverbank.
Okay, thank you.
Hello, thank you for that presentation. So I have a couple of questions, and I'm probably going to be going back and forth. So the oldest project that you built is New York. Would you say that's the first one, that Aqua?
All of our project experience really comes from our partner Clement.
Okay.
So
and-
we are definitely a startup company when it comes to that, but we have their experience, which is a very long time. They've been in business since the early 1990s. So that's 20 plus years.
So none of them have hit yet obviously the 50-year.
No.
So here where we see this, a floating casino that you showed, so that has already been finished and,
Yeah, that's existing. I was just
Okay.
showing the base. It's there. It's been there. I believe it was constructed in 2004, if I remember correctly.
and have you run into any structural problems that you didn't foresee?
No, all the floats work exactly as designed. The good part about them is that even if they are, taking a hypothetical, it's not even a hypothetical, but a most probable here is that a massive piece of debris comes down the river and strikes the building with great force on the foundation. The foundation's structured in such a way is that the outside may be damaged, but it is retained through the polystyrene sandwich that's in between, and then the backstop concrete on the other side, all of which are reinforced. So what it amounts to is this, that surface damage can be repaired, and the solidity of the waterborne foundation is not compromised at all.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, well, thank you. I'm going to open this up to any members of the public that would like to ask questions at this time. Stash, go ahead.
Yes, I have one simple question. What is the cost of the barge per square foot?
The cost of the foundation varies between about $190 and $120 a square foot.
How much?
$90 and $120 a square foot.
Land cost, probably about $10 a square foot. Could we agree on that? In general.
Here, I honestly don't know. I don't know what the city would be looking for that area.
My
Acreage.
other question is, how high
100.
of the water mark will this rise to?
It's designed to go to and above the current retaining wall height.
Which is
I believe, actually, 44? Yeah. 44, I wanted to be accurate on that. I was going to say 40, I was wrong.
44 feet.
Yeah.
Elevation 44.
Clarification for me on that last one. When you say elevation 44, is that 44 feet above the river's flood stage?
No, that's elevation 44.
Above sea level?
Main sea level.
How many feet is that above what they call zero at the river level?
Same thing. Zero in Hartford is zero mean sea level.
Okay, so just to give me a reference frame, every morning in the Hartford Current on page 2, they give a statistic as to the river height. And it will range from 1.5 feet to 17 feet. What is that statistic telling me?
That's the elevation above mean sea level, 17 feet above sea level, 4 feet above sea level.
All right, thank you. Question?
Yes, what's the footprint of the, and I have a follow-up question, what's the footprint of the project itself?
It's approximately an acre. I wish I had my figures directly in front of me. I can't give you an exact, but I'm happy to send that to you if you want to know.
And I have experience on the Connecticut River with docks and ensure the buildup of debris, one piece, one tree, another tree, another tree. And so in the design, I noticed it's somewhat rectangular. Have you thought about, or is that part of your design process to, I would recommend that it be designed to slop off as much debris that comes down as possible, and something that's perpendicular.
Yes.
The current is not a good design. It should be somewhat at the north end.
Okay.
Somewhat angled, because the trees that come down, that's larger trees,
Yes.
can be 100-foot, 120-foot cottonwoods typically, and they can be 4 or 5 feet in diameter. They will build up on each other, and you can get an acre of debris
Okay.
that just floats there, and then it gets stuck, and it gets hard to move it. So
It's a very good point. It's something that we would, there's nothing that precludes us from building a rounded form for it.
I think it's a great idea. I think it can be absolutely implemented successfully and should be very seriously considered. That's just one thing to keep in mind. I don't think it's catastrophic or problematic, so I very much support the idea.
Yes?
Maybe you said it in your presentation and I missed it. Did you say that as the facility rises, that it can continue to operate, the facility continues
Yes.
to operate?
That is correct.
So that there's never any downtime as it elevates?
Obviously, if you get, when we're talking about catastrophic up to the level of top, it's really, that turns into an issue of access from other aspects on it. But the facility itself will continue to go up.
Okay, very good.
Yes.
I didn't hear any mention, I happen to be with the Flood Control Commission, and I would hope that such a presentation we brought in front of the Flood Control Commission, because nothing can be done in the dike, around the dike, without permission of the
Okay.
Flood Control Commission. I can't imagine why that hasn't come up yet.
Well, I'm glad you brought it
Every
up.
MDC,
Yeah.
little hole they want to put in the dike, or every change by riverfront, has to come in front of the Flood Control Commission, which is 6 different towns represented, 4 or 5 different towns, one way or another. And that's through Public Works. So I suggest somebody talk to Frank, and at our next meeting, a Flood Control Commission, that maybe you give a similar presentation.
Okay.
Because I agree with this fellow over here, there are tank-size icebergs that come floating down that river. And if there's not some way to buffet those smashing against something, there's been history of pieces of earlier projects that are down Old Saybrook somewhere. Because these things come down with the powerful freight train, icebergs and trees. And I think that's probably one of the state's concerns. What would happen further down was whatever buffeting would be there. So I would suggest maybe that you talk to the Public Works about, in a couple of weeks, there's another flood control meeting. We'd love to have you.
Like to be there. Thank you. I appreciate it.
And Mr. McGarry, just for your benefit, the Flood Commission is one of the stops that this proposal would have to make, and it's included in a list that we've been developing of where this project would have to go.
Great, thank you.
And if I may, I want to just return to the level of the river for a minute, to the 44.
44 feet, is it the height of the total structure that we're
The
talking about?
top of the flood dike at the plaza is elevation 44. Which would
Okay.
be 44 feet above
The levy.
mean sea level. The ground at Mortensen Riverfront Plaza by this dike wall is about elevation 17, 18.
So in the last,
The wall is about 26 feet above the ground at that point.
in the last 30, 40, 50 years, what's the highest the river has?
There's been 2 floods, 1936 and 1938, where the river went to about elevation 36, 37. 1984, 1955, the river went to about elevation 30, which is just above the 100-year flood. 100-year flood's elevation 29.
That's true.
Any other questions?
Just a point of information on that, there's a website called the Hydraulic Prediction Center that I forget
the structure itself, will it have a certain type of technology to protect it and with that kind of information to prepare management for this type of flooding?
From a procedural and public safety standpoint, yes, it would be, I would recommend that so we know that what's going on. I mean, obviously, the building itself doesn't, there's nothing that ties it down or anything else. It sits by gravity and it rises with water. So it doesn't need to be, I'll put it this way.
It's free flow.
Yeah, it's free floating. It doesn't need to have a conditional action taken for its operation. But I definitely would recommend that there would be, depending upon what's going on, a level of stages to understand what can and can't be done and the level of public access that is available, depending upon how high it goes.
Now, as far as the safety point, now you have a structure that's rising and falling within its perimeter. What's there to protect someone, from falling or stepping in between?
That's one of the safety measures that have to be done. Normally, the building would be, in essence, incorporated with the existing walkway. When it starts going up, you'd have to install fencing or railing in order to keep people from going off the edge.
Thank you.
Thank you. Through the chair, I have one final question. So from an appraisal standpoint, how would you go about getting this appraised? Is there a comparable in Connecticut? Obviously, it's done in New York, so it's standard, but what about Connecticut?
From an appraisal standpoint, obviously we have the cost of construction, which is sort of the baseline of what it's going to take to have happen. So our floor to begin with is that. Candidly, we're hoping that it becomes more valuable over time. The engines for that are, I would say, standard appraisal practices that have to be done. Obviously, we understand that this is a new type of construction in a new setting that has not been done, certainly on this part of the planet, and probably from an amphibious standpoint, not anywhere else. There are other amphibious buildings, but not to this scale. So getting people to understand what that means and how that goes through the appraisal process, I'm really not in a position to tell you exactly how that goes, but we feel it's favorable from a number of different perspectives. I will say that we're dealing with Dublin O'Hearn, which is an insurance broker here. Well, they understand it's unusual, and they really like the idea of sitting there and saying, wait a minute, we can have a building that you come to us, the foundation is underwritten by Lloyd's, and when the water goes up 30 feet, it's going to be okay. And we say, yeah, it's going to be okay.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Curious, so they were talking about it going up and down over the course of the day, essentially. Do you know how fast it would need to rise before someone on the structure would actually be able to feel like they're rising?
Well, if it's going up that high, if it's going up that fast, there's another issue that's going on. Generally, I would not think that anybody on the structure would know that it's rising and falling.
Mark, you had a comment on that? No. Well, I'm looking to you as, it's font of all river knowledge here. Any other questions?
One last question.
Go ahead.
How many square feet is this barge?
I have to get back to you on that, I'll be honest with you. I should know off the top of my head, but I don't. It's drawing a blank.
The square footage of the barge we saw in St. Louis.
Oh, that one is, I would say in the neighborhood of, at least the ground floor is probably in the neighborhood of close to 100,000 square feet. It's a 100,000. It is a big facility. Yeah. This is much smaller than that, but I don't want to oversell the one in St. Louis. The one in St. Louis was created to float in a basin that is contained. It can go up and down, but really visitors to that site have no idea that the building is floating. It's done for a legal issue, and the legal issue is that you can gamble on the Mississippi. You cannot gamble on dry land in Missouri. So consequently, the Mississippi, quote unquote, surrounds the building.
So what's your vision of square footage for Hartford's idea?
hold on one second. I think it's in there.
Well, I can use my surveyor's knowledge here. You said about an acre, and an acre is 44,000 square feet. So if we've got something that's going to be,
Well, the cost of an acre is about 400,000 per acre.
The square footage for the promenade and the buildings together is about 36,000 square feet.
Not quite an acre. At 90 to 120,000 acre? To build a barn?
Yes.
okay. All right, well, George and David, I want to certainly thank you both for coming up. We'll be in touch with next steps
Okay.
on this. Very enlightening and entertaining presentation. It gives us all something to think about and dream about as what could be, and greatly appreciate your imagination and thoughtfulness in helping us try to do what most cities in the United States and around the world do when they sit on water, which is get an economic benefit from it. And Hartford has unfortunately not been able to really exploit our riverfront much more than for recreation. And this would give us the opportunity to begin to do something a little bit different here. I think I'm speaking for this group anyway. We're certainly interested in moving forward in some capacity, and we're going to we'll caucus and figure out how that works. Hearing nothing else, I'm going to adjourn this meeting. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Hey, Mike, how are you?
I will. I saw you.